Well, a very warm welcome again, guys. Hi, it's Kasim. I hope all is well. I hope you've been keeping well. I hope you've been healthy. I hope life is good for you. I wanted to spend the next sort of half an hour or so just talking to you openly, just talking about things that have happened in my life this week. I used to call this journal entries, but I'm just going to leave it as it is and just speak to you openly and plainly, and see whatever it is that may come up over the next sort of half an hour or so as I share some things with you that I've been thinking about. Perhaps they might be of some value to you. They might not. Either way, I'm gonna just speak to you openly and talk to you about what I've been thinking about. And as I say, I hope it adds some value to you. Before we continue, one of the things that I'm always recommending to people, and is actually going to link into one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about this week, is to really just, well, let me tell you the thing that I've been thinking about. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is to look at your beginning, to look at your origin story, to look at where you began, to look at what actually is made you the person that you are today. And I think in order to truly take ownership of your life and truly design your life, and in order to pursue your purpose, and in order to create the life that you want, a huge amount of it means that you have to actually explore what has led you to who you are and look at who it is that you are today. And I think it's interesting because when I was growing up, one of the things that I didn't want to do is I didn't want to look at myself, because in many ways I was scared of what I would find. I was scared of, was I the person that I thought I was? And it's just, it's a scary thing actually to come to a place where you fear your own self, where you fear your results. It's one of the things that when I used to work in a school, I used to tell students all the time that you know, students would say to me, well, people say to me, Mr. K, students used to call me Mr. K. My surname is Kawesa. So students used to call me Mr. K. And they would say to me, well, Mr. K, my mum or my dad or this teacher has told me that I shouldn't care about what people think. And of course, it is true that we shouldn't care about what people think of us, but that is not really the that is looking at that statement in a very literal, logical way, but it doesn't take into account the nuance, because the reality is that, of course, you should do whatever you want and people shouldn't judge you, and you shouldn't do what you want to do based on what people think. But the reality of life is that people do judge us, right? What we wear, how we sound, all of it comes and creates this accumulation or a culmination of who we end up becoming. And one of the things that I have come to realize is that a lot of us, we avoid ourselves. We try to ignore who we are. We don't want to look at our results. And ultimately, if you look at judgment and people who judge us, the reality is that in they're not necessarily judging our essence. What they're really judging is our results, who we've become, the way that we speak, the language that we use, how articulate we are, how much money we have, where we live, what kind of job that we have, right? And, I also think that part of this is that we have to look at ourselves and also admit that we do judge other people. I'm writing a book at the moment about um, why therapy at the moment isn't designed for men. And one of the things that I talk about in that book in one of the chapters is that a huge amount of the way therapy is done and when you're training, the way therapy is trained is that we're not supposed to judge our clients. And a lot of us don't recognize that actually the reason why Rogers core conditions of empathy, congruence, and unconditional positive regard are there. Those are the three core conditions that Carl Rogers came up with. The reason why those exist is because human beings do judge. We do judge each other. And I think that part of pursuing our dreams, part of looking at ourselves is realizing that results do matter. We are going to get judged by people. We do judge other people. And go back really to the basics. I was thinking on the way here, as I was thinking about what I was going to talk about today, One of the things that I was thinking about is how many times I tell people about my life. People, when I meet people or I speak to friends of mine, people say to me, Kasim, what do you do? What's your life like? How do you spend your time? And I then tell people that pretty much most of what I do is around doing research for my books. Um, I run a group counseling uh, therapy support group. I basically I do lots of things, but all of them in one way or another are related to counseling or helping men or helping people. And people usually say to me, Kasim, but your life sounds so boring, you know? And you just go to the gym and you eat kind of the same food. But I don't see my life as boring. I see my life as extremely exciting. But for a lot of people, I think it's interesting. I was watching a clip yesterday which was talking about video games and why video games are so enticing to people. And one of the things that it was saying is because video games are a real distraction, right? And I think if you are yet to figure out what you want to do with your life, you're yet to figure out your purpose, you're yet to figure out how you would like to spend your time and how you'd like to channel your energies or your chi, as the Chinese would say, unless you've figured out how you want to channel that chi, that energy, that time that you have, it's very easy to get distracted by life. It's interesting, and this is quite a controversial comment that I'm going to make, but I think people are like, oh, you should have a hobby and you should have hobbies and everything shouldn't be about one thing. Of course, I agree with that. There is an element that you should have a multiplication and multiple stool stands underneath your life, in that it can't just be all about your family and it can't just be all about your friends, or it can't just be all about making money. But there has to be an anchor, there has to be a foundation for which you build that life on, or that purpose or that lifestyle. And I feel like a huge amount of us, when we haven't figured out what we want to do in life, we end up having to need hobbies, right? But actually, if you look at people who figured out what it is that they want to do in their life, what people would call hobbies end up just becoming part of who they are, right? So, for example, I go to the gym and I would consider that as a hobby. But the reality is, it isn't really a hobby, if that makes sense. It's just what I do. It's part of my life. It's part of my philosophy that I've developed, which is that I don't want to be a burden to society and I don't want to be a burden to my family. I want to be able to show up with energy, with vigor, with drive. I want to be able to show up the best that I can, right? It's really, really, really difficult to pursue your destiny and your dreams if you have no energy. I remember some time ago, I was listening to, what's his name? TD Jakes. TD Jakes was talking about the fact that, and I'm paraphrasing what he was saying, but he basically said that building is for young people. And when I first heard that statement, I didn't exactly know what he meant. Oh, building is for young people. What does he mean by that? And it wasn't until I started writing books that I began to realize, ah, I see what he means. Because what he was basically saying is that in order to build something, in order to create something, in order to manifest all of our potential, which we have hidden and is lying somewhere inside of us, that requires energy, right? It requires being charged. Brendan Burchard, the famous speaker and high performance coach, talks about the charged life. He talks about the fact that if you are wanting to live that high performance lifestyle and life, you are going to need to vibrate on a different frequency to everybody else around you, right? If you want to be able to earn money, spend time with your family, um, create an incredible lifestyle for yourself, follow your dreams, and live the kind of life that you want. It takes energy. And the reality is, and I'm obviously generalizing here, but the reality is that as many of us get older, we lose energy. We don't have as much energy to spend on what we want to do, because either that energy is being zupped up by an illness, by family commitments. It may be being zapped by the fact that we don't eat right, or that we're trapped in a job or in a kind of life where we're almost in a rat trap, is it called a rat trap, in the rat race, where we can't seem to get any advantage, any options, any choices. We can't seem to get out of the race. And the reality is that also does happen a lot. But I think part of it, which goes back to the original point that I was making, is at some point you've just got to stop. You've just got to stop and just examine, where have you been? What's led you to where you are today? And is it working or is it not working? You know, when I wrote my book, How to Set Goals, 6 steps, right? The 6 steps in that book. One of the reasons, what in that book, the first step I call story. And the reason why I put that as the first step is because, look, it is really, 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 really difficult to change your life if you don't know what your life is. In many ways, most of us, particularly, as somebody who works in the counseling field, I see this a lot. In many ways, if you look at people's lives, people are really just mimicking and copying what they've learned or what they've seen. Rarely do people actually create anything new. It's very rare that people pioneer, right? And listen, I'm not saying that everybody should be pioneering and creating and building. There is certain parts of life when you should be doing that. And actually, I don't even think everybody should be doing that. It was interesting. Yesterday, I was listening to this guy who was one of the early investors in Apple. And he was saying that if you look at Steve Jobs, when he started Apple in the very beginning, he was terrible. That's why he got fired from the company. He was not very, very good. And he was talking about the fact that what may is we as people now today end up calling a revolutionary leader, and and managed to build this incredible organization and company, and has gone on to do incredible things. Of course, Apple being one of the biggest companies in the world and has really truly made a dent in the universe as Steve Jobs wanted. Is that the second time round, what Steve Jobs had was an incredible chief operating officer named Tim Cook. Tim Cook was what made the difference, which means, and the guy was saying that if you look at Tim Cook isn't got a natural leaning towards being a visionary and a creative, but he is very good with people. He's very good at management. He's very good at bringing people together, doing the deals. He's very good at operations, right? So all of us can't be builders and pioneers. Not everybody can be Elon Musk, right? Um, not everybody can be Jeff Bezos, but we can find our place in the universe. We can find our place in society. And I think that a huge amount of doing that is to begin to stop and explore our life, to explore, who are we mimicking? Who are we copying? Who are we trying to escape? Is our life being driven by fear, or is our life being driven by hope, by faith, by purpose? Because if our life is being driven by fear, that means that we are not going to be in that creative space, right? It's like, if one of the things that if you're living your life in a way where you don't want to get hurt in terms of relationships, intimate relationships, yeah, of course, you can live a life where you don't end up getting hurt and you isolate yourself and you live independently. But also, that also means that you don't get the rewards that come with a relationship. And there are many, many, many rewards that come with a relationship. Somebody who's got your back, somebody who has an investor in who's got what's the word I'm looking for? Um, a vested interest in you succeeding as a person. You've got somebody who will remember your birthday and who will remember special occasions and remember things about you. You get to have this incredible level of connectivity and intimacy that you just are not going to be able to do by yourself, right? Like, one of the things that I wrote down here, actually, which I wanted to talk to you about, is that life has pluses and minuses, right? There is always a cost to everything. You can't, I always say in that first book, the goal setting book that I wrote, I said, you can have everything and everything is possible, but just not all at once, right? And so, huge amount of life is looking at the costs and benefits. You cannot be traveling around the world all the time and meeting incredible people and seeing incredible things and eating incredible foods and experience incredible cultures, and at the same time be at home and maintain your friendships and have a routine every single day. That's just not possible, right? And I know that by me saying that, I may seem and sound like I'm being negative or that I'm being pessimistic, but actually, one of the things that I feel we have to remember is there's a reason why pessimism exists, right? If you look around at the universe and the world, anything which seems to be universal has an evolutionary reason, right? So, for example, anxiety. Since every single person across the globe seems to have anxiety, there is a reason why anxiety from a evolutionary or Darwinian perspective exists. Do you know what I mean? It exists for a purpose. And so in the same token, there are other emotions and other things that exist in the world that if they're there and everyone seems to experience them and have them, then they must be there for a reason. And so what I guess I would encourage you to do, and I always say to everybody, it's your life, you can do whatever the hell you want to do. I can't really tell you what to do or stop you from doing whatever it is that you want to do, but my thing that I recommend to you is take pause. you know have a look at your life, man. Is your life the way that you want it to go? Where have you been? What's your story? All of us have a story. Whenever I'm in counseling and I first meet a client, the first thing that I always want to know is what's their story. Everyone has a story. I was with a client the other day. I started on Friday with a new client, and I said to him, "What's your story?" And he was like, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, let's go back. Give me your earliest memory um, of what you remember and just talk to me about your life. What's led up? What's your family life been like? What are your fears? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What do you want in life? What patterns have you seen come up? What things have you always been puzzled by, right? What things keep showing up over and over and over again?" And it's ironic because he said he nothing much had happened in his life, and well, I can assure you, after what he shared with me in that first session, a lot has happened in his life. The thing for him is he just thought that was normal, you know? And sometimes as you begin to talk and share your story and talk about what you've been through and experienced and haven't experienced, sometimes you begin to be shocked by only your own life. It's interesting because one of the things that I wrote down here is about something that I've been thinking a lot about. So in therapy, a lot of men, when I'm speaking to men, many men will come into therapy, and this was triggered by that client who I met on Friday. He said to me, "Why should I talk about my feelings? Why should I talk about the past? Why should I talk about what's happened to me?" You know? And I began to realize that I don't think a lot of people truly understand the power of talking. And I don't really think that a lot of us really understand what the role of talking is, of language, linguistics. I don't really think that a lot of us understand this. I was explaining to him that as you are speaking, speaking isn't just speaking, speaking is thinking, speaking is articulation. Listen, I say to people all the time, in therapy, that one of the most powerful things that they can begin to do is to begin to write down their life, to journal. Because as you begin to write and talk about your life, you actually have to articulate it. You have to think about it. You have to put it in an order. You have to find the right words to describe what you're feeling, what happened. And what begins to become interesting is you begin to reveal yourself to yourself, because you begin, for example, to see from what perspective you're telling your story. Are you telling your story in terms of the first person or third person or second person? Are you talking about your life in terms of the past or the future? Are you talking about your life in a pessimistic way or an optimistic way? You begin to witness, am I talking about my life as if this is a chapter or this is the end of my story? And it's fascinating, right? Because it's interesting. There is a form of therapy called narrative therapy, and narrative therapy looks and delves at some of the stories that we tell. And a huge principle that narrative therapy works from is that all of us as people are basically living these scripts. Scripts like, when I was a child, I was not loved. I'm unlovable. I'm unworthy. I can never be accepted. I'm not good enough. I'm the ugly one. I'm the stupid one. I have ADHD. And many of these scripts have like a and, because therefore they are in many ways barriers and hinderers to progression for many of us. And so what ends up happening is that these narratives become a bit like a box. They become a bit like a container where we're free to 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 do what we want in the container, but we can never truly do branch out and expand who we are and realize our potential, right? We can't be creative. If you give me only two colors to work with, I'm then strapped as to what I can design. Doesn't mean I can't be creative, but I'm limited. And what I would encourage you to do is really, in that process of having a little look at yourself, is look at how many crayons you have in order to design your life, right? A huge amount of why I talk about this, and it's another thing actually that I've been thinking a lot about this week is, look, you, and it's part of the reason why I began this off by talking about the story and where we've been and looking at what's made us who we are. A lot of us forget that you can build the life that you want. You can create the kind of lifestyle that you want. You can literally take the life that you've been brought up in and you can manifest it in a really incredible and positive way. You can get new people. You can acquire new skills. You can build the teams that you want. You can improve your thinking, improve your creativity. You can develop, you can grow, you can transform as a person. And I think a lot of us, we don't realize that that is actually possible for us. We may recognize that it's possible for other people, but we might not necessarily recognize that it's possible for us. I'm here to remind you, brother, that the world is this absolutely incredible, complicated, nuanced, doesn't make sense, but does make sense sort of world. Magic is absolutely possible. Don't ask me how it happens. Don't ask me to give you a formula. Don't ask me the origins of it. All I know is that change is possible. I was in Sutton earlier on this week. I was in Sutton on Thursday. I think it was Thursday. Yeah, it was Thursday that I was in Sutton, and I was talking to a woman. I was at a an event with my full-time job where I was holding a stall at a health event. This is for people who wanted to get information about their weight and stuff like that. And inside of the center that was at, there was a cafe. And inside of that cafe was a woman called Sharon. Sharon was an incredible woman. Sharon had this energy, this vibrancy. She had this spark about her. And I said to her, look, Sharon, you must have a story, okay? Because your level of vibrancy and energy or chi is uncommon. It just isn't normal. Why are you so happy? Whenever I meet people like that, I'm always wanting to know, because you just don't, when you meet a spark, when you meet something magical, obviously unicorns don't just appear every single day. So whenever I meet one, I'm or them or he or she or they, whenever I meet somebody who has a spark about them. I always want to know why. How did they end up like that? And her story was fascinating. She said to me that she's got arthritis. She has had lots of operations because she's got a back. She had a back issue. She has tranquilizers and she has to have injections in her back every day. Two of her children have ADHD, and one of them is disabled. And she was saying to me, "Look, Kasim, so much shit has happened in my life. What else she said? Oh, and she said to me that she was told at 18 that she was never going to be able to have kids because she has endometriosis, and of course she went on to have kids, and now her kids have had grandkids. Anyway, long story short is I could not believe this woman said to me, "Listen, Cassim, I could be the victim and I could use what's happened to me as a reason to not try, to not go for anything." But she said, I was tired of being the victim. And I said to her, but because she was earlier on, she had been speaking about her brother, and her brother is like 1 year older than her, and her brother also has had a lot of problems in his life, but he is just struggling. And I said to her, so what's the difference? If both of you were born in the same house, around the similar age, and you both have difficulties, why you? Why are you so different? What is it that you are doing that your brother is not doing? She said, look, Cassie, it was a choice. I said, what? She said, it was a choice. She said, I decided I was not happy with how I was living my life and I changed it. She said, I wanted to be positive. I wanted to live a life of vibrancy, and I do. She said, that does not mean that I don't have bad days. That does not mean that I don't have depressed days. That does not mean that I'm not going to have days when I'm in absolute pain. Of course I am. Right? She said, I still have a disabled son and I still have another child who's got ADHD. It's not easy for me. But she said, look, I made the choice that this is the life that I wanted to live. And I've got to tell you guys, this isn't a one off. This is a very common thing that I meet with people who have that spark. That word choice, I don't really think most of us truly understand the power of choice to just decide this is who you're going to be, this is how things are. Acceptance, right, is also part of this. There is something called acceptance therapy. There's something called acceptance therapy. Acceptance therapy, a huge amount of it, people don't understand how much of a relief it is when you accept your life and you accept things that have happened and you accept that this is the way it has unfolded and these are the cards that you've been dealt. And then you do something about it. Many times you can't actually do anything about it, but there is a power in just acknowledging the fact that it's happened, right? And this goes back to what I was talking about in the beginning. I think so many of us, we avoid exploring and looking at our life that it disempowers us. We end up in a situation where we don't have autonomy and power and self-esteem and self-reliance because we don't take ownership of our life and our results and our story. And I encourage you to do it, man. I encourage you to take ownership of your story. I encourage you to really own your life and then decide how you want to live it. There is so much power in it, I'm telling you, right? Look at your beginning. Where have you been? What have you been doing? How have you arrived at where you've arrived at? What's your story, man? Talk about your life. I'm telling you that talking about your life with a therapist, talking to a professional, doing a thing like this on YouTube, writing a book about like a memoir or your story, um, journaling. There is something really powerful about doing that, and I just don't think enough of us do it. And this does not is not gender specific; it's to everybody. Taking ownership of your story, whether you're male, female, however you identify, is a very, 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 very powerful thing, in my opinion, of course. And in me saying all of this, by the way, I have to admit and always say to everybody that there's always an exception, you know, there's nuance. Things don't just because you've accepted your reality doesn't mean that it's not going to be painful. Just because you've taken ownership of your story, it doesn't mean that things are going to be any better, you know? I have to say that because it's just a reality. Um, and one of the last things that I want to leave you with, which I was thinking about, is I was thinking about how, what do you call it in English? I went to a school on Monday, I think it was Monday or Tuesday. No, it was Tuesday. I went to a private school on Tuesday, and when I arrived at that private school, I said to the woman, "Why did you the DSL, the designated safeguarding lead?" I said to her, "Can I ask why did you invite me to come to see your students and talk to them about mental health?" And she said to me that part of the reason why she'd done this is because last year they had a bit of an issue, and it's been a growing issue where many of the students who had graduated from the private school and left came back when they were having mental health issues and other issues because the private school had basically got themselves in a situation where all of their support, the counselors and all of these various people, all were inside the house. And what the private school had not done is brought any outside organizations to speak to the students. And now that the students have left and become adults and they've gone on to live their lives, they were struggling, but they didn't know what existed out there. And so the part of the reason why she invited me in is that she wanted me to speak to the students so that I can share with them that there are other organizations that exist that the young person or that adult can use if the school isn't there or cannot support them in a certain way. So that leads me to what I want to say, which is that I've been thinking about the fact that I believe that a huge, really important thing that as men and as people that we want to do is that we want to ensure that we know what actually exists out there that is free, right? That can help us and support us beyond ourselves. And a huge amount of this is not depending on one thing, not simply depending on your work, not simply just depending on your family, not simply just depending on your spouse. One of the things that's really interesting is I've been doing a lot of research around men and depression. And it's fascinating for me to read that one of the most painful things that leads men down the path of depression is breakups. And I was trying to figure out what is it about breakups or divorces specifically that cause men to go down such a dark path? And why is it that women, on average, of course, I'm generalizing here because every situation is different, but on average, will tend to not have as a big a fall out of a divorce as a man does. And the one of the key factors, is relationships. When women leave relationships, they've got other people in their lives, their mom, their best friend, who support them. Whereas the man is left alone. It's interesting because one of the things that many people don't realize is that when a man gets divorced, in many situations, that man loses everything and loses many, many, many relationships. Because if you look at a lot of men, a lot of their relationships that they've had are through the relationship that they have or their marriage. And so when that relationship ends with people like neighbors, with the people who own the dog down the road, or they used to go to their wife's or their partner's golfing or whatever it may be, they lose all of that and they're left alone. And so a huge thing that I've been thinking about is really just developing multiple relationships, but not just relationships, but looking at the actual services that exist out there. And not just services, but looking at your options and expanding your options. There are many, 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 many people who their only plan for retirement is their pension. And I'm saying to you that some of you are living in a house at the moment where you have a lot of equity in that property. And I'm not saying do this, you can do whatever it is that you want in your life, but I'm just suggesting that you think outside of the box in and say, why don't we take a little bit of equity out of that property and buy a studio flat? I'm not saying that you're going to be able to afford it. I'm not saying that do it, but I'm just saying are you thinking outside of the box here? Are you looking at all of your options and expanding and multiplying your options? I was saying to somebody, I can't remember when it was, but I was saying to them that so many people don't realize that. Well, actually, it all started off because let me come back to my point in a second. I was speaking to the person because I was explaining to them that when we are born, we have two dreams. The first is the dream that we have, that our parents have for us. You know, I want a boy, I want a girl, I want them to be into sports, I want them to like Chelsea, blah 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 blah. I want them to go to university, etc. And then we also have our own dream. And what our parents or carers are supposed to do is we're supposed to use their dream until we reach a certain age. That age can be different for people. Some of them is 13, some of them is 5, some of them is 18. But basically, at some point, we're supposed to divorce our parents' dreams and marry our own dream so that we can pursue that. And I was saying that a huge problem that I see with so many of us is that we don't end up pursuing our dream. We don't end up following and pursuing our choices because so many of us in life end up in a situation where we limit our choices because we don't want to be rejected, because we don't want to fail, right? And there is so much out there. There are so many different things out there that we can pursue, that we can realize, that we can become, that we can achieve. So many, right? Remember that your potential is not what you've done. Your potential is what you haven't done. Your results are what you've done. Your potential is hidden, is in you. Whatever is in you is your potential. Whatever you've realized is your results, is a piece of your potential. And what I would encourage you to do is, and again, I always say to you guys, it's your life. You can do whatever it is that you want. I can't tell you what you should do with your life, right? But I encourage you to just look at what options exist out there for you. You know, did you decide that your potential was a certain way, but you decided too early? You you chose too early and you didn't allow yourself to blossom and grow and develop before you chose what you should do. Because there are so many people today that their capacity is huge because of what they've been through and what they've achieved. And the foundation has been set for them to build an incredible life. Oh, Lord, help me, please. And the thing is, they don't even know because they chose too early. They clocked out. There's a lot of people out in society who've given up on life. Their life is already set, but they have so much more. I'm not saying go and do it if you don't want to. It has to be your choice. It has to be your life. But I'm just saying it would be wonderful if we can see what you can do in your lifetime. So that's where I'll leave it this week. I don't know whether it's been useful for you, what I've shared. As I say, these are just random things that I've been speaking about. There is no right or wrong answer. Share with me what your thoughts are. Comment below. I'm always keen to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for listening to me. I really, 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 really appreciate it. And I will speak to you very, very soon. Bye for now.